call that means danger. Now, the response. Stand by hold as published, an instruction no pilot expects to hear in an emergency. The problem? Time was already running out. The cockpit was filling with questions, the margin for error shrinking by the second. In the next 6 minutes, 3 compounding failures collide. This is the story of a Boeing 737 operated by Continental Wings, flying from Miami to Atlanta, and how a routine hold and one delayed decision turned a crisis into a catastrophe. The flight had departed on schedule, heading toward its destination as the evening darkened outside. The weather was deteriorating, with moderate turbulence and low visibility. Air traffic was busy, with several aircraft already in the pattern. The crew was experienced, though this approach was into a less familiar airport. A minor MEL item had been logged for one auxiliary system, but it was not critical. An emergency had been reported, but the exact nature was not yet clear. It could have been medical, smoke, engine, pressurization, fuel, flight control, or security related. The first constraint appeared immediately. The assigned runway was unavailable, forcing ATC to manage spacing carefully. Wind shear had been reported, adding another layer of challenge for the pilots. Traffic saturation limited options, and the crew had to stay patient while navigating safely. Frequency congestion made communication tricky, and ATC was juggling multiple aircraft and emergencies simultaneously. A hold was explained simply: a published racetrack pattern used to manage spacing between aircraft. It bought time, but every minute also burned fuel and increased risk, especially with an aircraft already compromised. ATC came back over the radio and said, "Continental Wings 512, enter hold at Bravo Fix. Maintain 5,000 feet. Expect further clearance in 5 minutes." The crew acknowledged. The autopilot engaged, turning the aircraft smoothly into the loop. Everything seemed routine, yet tension quietly built. The minor electrical smoke alert from earlier didn't disappear. Faint smoke began curling from the panel again, and the smell in the cockpit became noticeable. The cabin temperature started creeping up. Oxygen levels stayed normal, but flight attendants noticed passengers fanning themselves. The clock ticked, and minutes in the hold weren't just time. They were growing risk. The first officer called out items on the checklist. Smoke confirmed. Electrical panel 2. Fuel checked level normal. Altitude and heading confirmed for hold. The captain set priorities clearly. Aviate first, navigate second, and communicate last, but keep ATC informed. The crew confirmed the emergency was electrical smoke and a confirmed problem, not just a suspicion. The aircraft continued circling in the racetrack hold, but the situation slowly worsened. Smoke, once faint, now becomes visible. It drifted across the cockpit, and the smell intensified. Red warning lights flashed repeatedly on the electrical panel. The engine degraded into a full failure, adding a harsh rumble and warning siren that echoed through the cabin. Hydraulic pressure decreased slightly. The flight controls stiffened and demanded more effort from the pilot. Cabin pressure dropped slowly. Flight attendants moved quickly to assess passenger comfort, while a few passengers began noticing the change in air quality. Outside, the weather deteriorated further. Wind shear alerts appeared on the radar. Microburst warnings flashed, visibility dropped, and patches of low clouds cut through the approach corridor. ATC scrambled to manage traffic. Another aircraft on the frequency declared an emergency, further congesting communications. A readback error occurred between controllers, adding confusion to an already high-stress situation. Holding was no longer just a delay. Every turn in the pattern brought more danger. The pilots knew that staying in the racetrack was becoming the very threat they were trying to avoid. The aircraft approached the critical phase. The crew had only seconds to decide, and every option carried risk. They debated whether to declare unable to hold, request immediate vectors straight in, divert, descend to a safer altitude, or push for a landing overweight, accepting higher risk. On the ground, ATC needed spacing and a clear runway. In the cockpit, every second counted, and the crew needed immediate landing or descent. Tension peaked. The captain took a deep breath, and then made the call. He announced that they were unable to hold it due to an emergency. They needed the nearest suitable runway immediately, and they were declaring a fuel emergency. The decision was made. The next few minutes would define safety. Every action now was decisive, but the runway they had been waiting for was no longer available. An accident had blocked the surface. Suddenly, a crosswind picked up, stronger than predicted, making the approach riskier. The instrument landing system failed, runway lights dimmed, and their navigational aids were compromised. Fuel dropped faster than planned, leaving them with less than 10 minutes before reaching critical reserves. One failure cascaded into another. Workload peaked, human factors pressed, and conflicting information from the cabin added to the pressure. Smoke appeared in the cabin, its origin unclear, adding another layer of tension. ATC instructions conflicted with the onboard situation, forcing split-second judgment. Time, altitude, fuel, and options shrunk together, squeezing the crew into a high-stakes decision point where every second counted. ATC finally cleared them out of the hole, or maybe the crew just had to break out themselves. There was no time to waste. Everything happened in a blur. Vectors, descent, and approach briefing compressed into seconds. Every decision carried risk. They took checklist shortcut, fully aware of the risks, but somehow their coordination became their strongest weapon. The cockpit was alive with sound. Sync rate, pull up, wind shear. The alarms echoed through the tiny space, making hearts pound. The cabin held its breath. That silence made the stakes feel even higher. Then came the single pivotal moment. The captain's voice cut through the tension. Runway in sight. Going around is not possible. Commit to landing. At last, the aircraft landed safely, though the landing was tense and firm. Every second of the approach had mattered. Fire services were on standby, ready in case anything went wrong. Passengers deplaned cautiously, some shaken, some relieved, but all safe. The crew focused on the last 60 seconds, keeping everyone calm, monitoring instruments, confirming the landing sequence, and making sure all procedures were completed precisely. Later, it became clear why the hold had happened. ATC was needed to manage traffic safely. The runway had been temporarily blocked, and spacing between other aircraft was critical. The crew had initially accepted the hold because they trusted ATC instructions and believed the situation was manageable, but the missing information about the runway accident and the fast-developing crosswind arrived too late to change the initial plan. From this story, we learned a lesson that holding was a tool, not a solution. In an emergency, time became the enemy. Viewers should remember how crews prioritized safety first, balancing aircraft control, fuel, systems, and passenger conditions simultaneously. They should also understand why ATC sometimes could not clear a direct landing, even for a Mayday, because other aircraft and runway constraints demanded separation, and how quickly small delays became critical, especially when fuel was low or smoke was present, and every second truly mattered.